Arab executive fakes a coma to test his African wife. Then this happened. Would your loved one stay by your side if you were at your weakest? Or would they betray you the moment you couldn't fight back? Billionaire businessman Karim Al-Fayed had everything: power, money, and a beautiful wife, Amina. But when rumors reached him that she was only after his wealth, he did something unthinkable. He faked a coma. For weeks, he lay motionless in a hospital bed, listening, waiting, until he heard something that changed everything. What did she do? Did she pass the test? Or did she make a mistake that she would regret forever? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more shocking and inspiring stories. Now let's dive into this incredible story. The rhythmic beeping of the hospital monitors echoed in the dimly lit room. The scent of antiseptic hung in the air, and the steady hum of the air conditioner was the only sound breaking the silence. Lying motionless on the bed, Karim Al-Fayed listened. His heart pounded in his chest, though he didn't move a muscle. His breaths were slow and controlled, just as they had been for the past 10 days. To the world, he was a billionaire in a coma, the victim of a near-fatal accident. But in reality, Karim was wide awake, watching, waiting, testing. The moment his private doctor had told him that his injuries weren't fatal, an idea had formed in his mind, one that only a man as powerful as him could execute. What if he pretended to be unconscious? What if he used this moment to test the one person who claimed to love him the most? His wife, Amina. Karim had heard the whispers. Do you really think she loves you? You're just a paycheck to her. A woman like that, she's only loyal to your wealth. He had ignored them for years. He had refused to believe that the beautiful woman who had once sworn to love him could be capable of betrayal. But doubt had begun to fester inside him like a slow-growing poison. And so, he had stayed silent. For 10 days, he had let the world believe that he was unresponsive. He had let his empire fall into the hands of his board members. He had let his wife grieve, panic, cry. And then, he had listened. What he had heard so far had been mixed. Amina had come to the hospital every day. She had held his hand. She had whispered sweet words into his ear. But something felt off. There was no desperation in her voice, no real sorrow. And today, as the door to his hospital room creaked open, he had a feeling he was about to find out why. He heard her heels clicking against the tile floor. Then, another set of footsteps. A man's. Karim's heart clenched, but he remained still, his face blank, his breaths steady. Amina sighed dramatically as she sat beside his bed. I can't take this anymore, she muttered, her voice dripping with frustration rather than sorrow. The man chuckled, a deep, familiar chuckle. His brother, Tariq. Karim fought the urge to react. His own brother, here, with his wife, laughing. Amina exhaled sharply. 10 days, Tariq. 10 days I've had to sit here and pretend like I care. Like I'm devastated. Tariq sighed. Patience, my love. My love. The words punched Karim harder than any business rival ever could. His wife, his own blood, betraying him right here in his presence. Amina let out a bitter laugh. I can't believe he's still alive. Tariq hummed. If he were dead, things would be easier. The money, the assets, all ours. Ours. A wave of red-hot rage surged through Karim's veins. They had already planned everything. The fortune he had spent his life building. The power he had earned. They had been waiting for him to die so they could take it all. Amina leaned closer, her voice dropping into a whisper. "Are you sure he won't wake up?" Tariq scoffed. "He's in a coma. He can't hear us." Karim's hands twitched under the blanket. "Oh, but I can." And in that moment, he made a silent vow. They wanted his empire. They wanted him dead. Then they were about to regret every single word they had just said, because Karim Al-Fayed was about to wake up. And when he did, they would both pay the price. Karim Al-Fayed had never been a patient man. He had built an empire from nothing, had fought his way through ruthless competitors, and had always been 2 steps ahead of those who wanted to see him fall. But nothing could have prepared him for this betrayal. His own wife, his own brother, whispering over his supposedly unconscious body, planning to steal his fortune, to erase him from existence. They thought he was helpless, but they were about to learn that a man like Karim never stays down for long. He needed a plan, a good one. He couldn't just wake up and expose them. Not yet. That would be too easy. They would just spin lies, act innocent, pretend they never meant what they said. No, Karim had spent years playing the long game in business. And this was personal. The next morning, the doctor walked into the hospital room. Karim listened carefully, controlling his breathing, waiting. "Mrs. Al-Fayed," the doctor said, his voice calm but firm. "I have some news." Amina, who had been scrolling through her phone, barely looked up. "Hmm?" she hummed, her voice bored. Karim wanted to clench his fists. 10 days ago, she had been sobbing at his bedside. 10 days ago, she had played the perfect grieving wife. Now, she was tired of pretending. The doctor cleared his throat. "Your husband's condition is stable. His brain activity is improving. There is a chance he might regain consciousness soon." Silence. Then Amina laughed. "Doctor," she said smoothly, crossing her legs. "You said that 5 days ago, and yet, here we are." Karim could hear the annoyance in her voice. She wasn't worried about him. She was worried about his money slipping out of her hands. The doctor hesitated. "I understand this has been difficult for you, but we need to prepare for all possibilities. If Mr. Al-Fayed wakes up, he may experience memory loss, confusion." "Memory loss?" Amina interrupted, and now she sounded interested. Too interested. Karim felt a chill crawl up his spine. She was calculating. After a long pause, Amina sighed dramatically. "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate the update." The doctor nodded, gave Karim's unconscious body one last glance, and left the room. As soon as the door clicked shut, Amina pulled out her phone and dialed a number. A few seconds later, a voice answered. "Tariq." Of course. "He might wake up soon," she said, keeping her voice low. "We need to be ready." Karim could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Ready for what? What the hell were they planning? Tariq's voice came through the speaker, calm and controlled. "Relax. We've come this far. If he wakes up, we'll handle it." Amina sighed, frustrated. "You don't understand. The money is still in his name. If he wakes up and remembers everything, we'll have nothing." Tariq's voice darkened. "Then We make sure he doesn't remember. Cold. Calculated. Merciless. Kareem had spent his whole life ruthless in business. But this was on another level. They weren't just waiting for him to die. They were planning to erase him. And that's when he knew he couldn't wait any longer. It was time. Kareem let out a soft, low groan. The sound was barely audible, but in the silence of the hospital room, it might as well have been a gunshot. Amina froze. Her phone slipped slightly in her grip. "Kareem?" she whispered. He let out another groan, shifting slightly under the sheets. Her breathing sharpened, and for the first time in days, he heard real fear in her voice. "Doctor!" she called out, her voice high-pitched. "Doctor! Something is happening!" Kareem fought to keep the smirk off his lips. He wasn't fully exposing himself yet. Not until he had everything he needed. But one thing was clear. Amina and Tariq had no idea what was coming for them. And when he finally woke up completely, they would wish he had stayed in that coma forever. The hospital room erupted into chaos. The moment Kareem let out a groan, Amina bolted from her chair, her phone nearly slipping from her hand. Her breathing was sharp, her fingers trembling as she pressed the call button on the wall. Within seconds, nurses and doctors rushed inside, the room filling with frantic voices. "He's responding," a nurse said, checking the monitors. Amina stared at him, her face carefully masked, but Kareem could feel it. The panic. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't crying tears of joy. She was terrified. Because if he woke up, if he remembered everything, her carefully built plan would crumble. Kareem felt hands lifting his arms, a flashlight flickering in front of his barely opened eyes. He kept his movements sluggish, his lips parting like he was struggling to form words. "Mr. Al-Fayed, can you hear me?" the doctor asked. Kareem let out another groan, blinking slowly. His gaze drifted past the doctor, landing directly on Amina. And for the first time, he let his eyes linger. Watch her. Read her. Her lips were slightly parted, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. But it was her hands that gave her away. They were clenched into tight fists at her sides. Not from worry, from fear. The doctor turned to Amina. "Mrs. Al-Fayed, this is a great sign. He's showing consciousness. His recovery might be quicker than we expected." Amina swallowed hard. That's wonderful." But Kareem heard the slight shake in her voice. He was winning. She just didn't know it yet. 2 hours later, the hospital had settled into a strange quiet. The doctors had done their tests, confirming that Kareem's body was responding. They still weren't sure about his memory, and that was exactly what he needed, because he wasn't ready to reveal his hand just yet. Not until he had proof. Not until he could destroy them both. The door creaked open, and Amina stepped inside. Alone. Her heels clicked against the tile floor, slow, deliberate. She paused at the edge of his bed, staring at him. For the first time in days, they were alone, and Kareem didn't miss the way her fingers curled slightly, like she was restraining herself from touching him, like she was trying to decide if he was still a threat. She wet her lips. "Kareem?" His gaze flickered to her, half-lidded, dazed. "Amina," he whispered, letting his voice crack slightly, playing his role. Her breath hitched. You remember me?" Kareem let a moment of silence stretch between them. Then slowly he shook his head. Her entire body stiffened. She masked it quickly, but Kareem saw the way her chest rose in a sharp breath, the flicker of something, relief, crossing her face. He had been right. She had been waiting for this. Amina forced a shaky smile, stepping closer. It's okay, Habibi. You were in a coma for a long time. It's normal to feel confused. He let his fingers twitch on the blanket, his breaths slow. Let her think she was winning. Let her believe she had a chance to control him. She sat at the edge of the bed, reaching for his hand. Her touch was warm. Too warm. Deceptive. If you don't remember much, she whispered, her voice careful, too careful. Maybe it's best if we start fresh. Karim almost laughed. Start fresh? After plotting to steal his empire? She continued, stroking his fingers, her voice gentle. No pressure, okay? You just focus on getting better. I'll take care of everything. Karim played along, blinking up at her like a helpless man grasping for clarity. Everything? He rasped. She smiled, soft, perfect, fake. Yes, my love, everything. Karim let out a slow breath, relaxing against the pillows. He had his answer. Amina thought he had lost his memory. She believed she had won. But what she didn't know was that he had just begun to play the game. And by the time he was done, by the time he exposed her, by the time he made her regret every whispered lie she had told in this very room, she would wish she had pulled the plug on him when she had the chance. Karim Al-Fayed had spent his life making ruthless decisions. Whether in business, power, or strategy, he never acted without calculating every possible outcome. And now, as he lay in this hospital bed, playing the fool, he was crafting his greatest scheme yet. Amina thought she had won. She believed he had lost his memory. But in reality, he was watching, listening, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment was coming soon. Later that evening, Karim's room was quiet. The nurses had checked in, the machines continued their steady beeping, and outside, the world went on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Amina had left earlier, pretending to be a loving, devoted wife, whispering soft words and stroking his hand. But Karim knew the truth. She wasn't here out of love. She was here to make sure he stayed broken. The thought made his blood boil. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. A doctor stepped inside. Not his usual doctor. This man was older, with sharp eyes and a calm, controlled demeanor. He approached the bed, flipping through Karim's file. "How are you feeling, Mr. Al-Fayed?" Karim hesitated, keeping up his act. "Tired." The doctor hummed, checking the monitors. "That's expected. You've been unconscious for quite some time." Then, a pause. "Your wife tells me you don't remember much." Karim's breath stilled. So this was the test. Amina had spoken to him. He forced himself to look dazed, blinking slowly. "It's blurry." The doctor nodded, watching him closely. "Amina has been handling your affairs while you recover," he continued. "She's spoken with your legal team. They mentioned adjustments to your accounts." Adjustments? A slow, icy rage crept into Karim's chest. That snake. She was already moving his money, preparing for the moment he was declared unfit to manage his empire. Karim exhaled shakily, playing his role. I don't know." The doctor studied him for a long moment. Then, leaning slightly closer, he said something that sent a chill through Karim's spine. "Mr. Al-Fayed, be careful who you trust." Their eyes met. Kareem felt his fingers curl beneath the blanket. This doctor knew. He wasn't just here for a routine checkup. He was warning him. The man straightened, adjusting his coat. Rest for now. Your body is healing, and we need to take things slowly. Kareem nodded weakly, watching as the doctor left the room. But inside, his mind was on fire. This was worse than he thought. Amina wasn't just waiting for him to die. She was actively dismantling his empire while he lay here, pretending to be helpless. And if he didn't act soon, there would be nothing left when he finally revealed the truth. Hours later, the door opened again. Amina. She stepped inside quietly, moving with the same grace and confidence she always carried. Her eyes flickered toward the machines, scanning them like she was confirming something. Then she smiled. Fake. Practiced. Poisonous. "Habibi," she whispered, approaching his bed. "How are you feeling?" Kareem let out a slow, weak breath. "Better." Amina sighed, as if relieved. "I spoke to the doctors. They say your recovery will take time. But I'll be here for you, my love." Lies. She sat beside him, her fingers lightly grazing his hand. "We should start preparing for the future," she continued, her voice smooth, careful. "The company, the finances. They need someone to handle things while you heal." Kareem swallowed hard. "Who?" Her smile grew. "I will, of course," she said. "Of course." Kareem let his gaze drift past her, his expression blank. He needed her to believe that he was falling for it, that he was too weak to argue. I don't know," he murmured. Amina leaned in, close, too close, her breath warm against his skin. "Don't worry, my love. You trust me, don't you?" Kareem forced himself to hesitate, to let his silence stretch just long enough before whispering, "Yes." Her fingers squeezed his hand gently, and he knew. She thought she had won, but she had no idea. That he was about to take everything back. And when he did, she would regret ever crossing him. Kareem had spent his entire life playing the long game. In business, in power, in control, he had always been the one to see 10 steps ahead, the one to predict his enemies' moves before they even made them. Now, as he lay in that hospital bed, pretending to be weak, vulnerable, broken, he was calculating his next strike. Amina thought she was winning. She had no idea that the man she was trying to destroy had already begun dismantling her plans from the inside. And soon, she would realize that the hunter had just become the hunted. The next morning, Kareem took his first real step toward revenge. He waited until Amina left the room, her perfume still lingering in the air, her final whispered words echoing in his mind. "You trust me, don't you?" He had almost laughed. Now, with the hospital room empty, Kareem slowly turned his head, his first real movement since waking up. His muscles protested, his body stiff from days of pretending to be weak. But he forced himself to push through it. Because he had work to do. His hand trembled as he reached for the small emergency call button attached to his bed. But he didn't press it for a nurse. No, he pressed it for someone else. Someone Amina would never see coming. 15 minutes later, the door creaked open. A man stepped inside, tall, sharp-eyed, dangerous. Hassan, Kareem's most trusted security chief. The moment their eyes met, Hassan's expression hardened. "You're awake." His voice was low, cautious. Kareem gave a slow nod, his throat still raw. I never left. Hassan's jaw clenched. I suspected as much. He glanced at the machines, at the still active IV line, at the monitors beeping steadily. Then, lowering his voice, he asked the one question Karim had been waiting for. How bad is it? Karim's hands curled into fists beneath the blanket. Worse than we thought. His voice was barely above a whisper. Amina and Tariq, they're already moving. They're preparing to take control of my assets. Hassan's expression darkened. They think you've lost your memory. Karim's lips twitched slightly. Not a smile, but something deadlier. They're about to wish that I had. A long silence passed between them. Then Hassan stepped closer. What do you need me to do? Karim took a slow breath, calculating. Step by step, move by move. First, he needed proof. Solid, undeniable evidence of their betrayal. Not just whispers in the dark, but something that would bring them both to their knees. And he knew exactly how to get it. Set up surveillance, Karim said. I want eyes on Amina, everywhere. The house, the office, her private meetings, and I want access to my accounts. His voice hardened. Quietly. Hassan nodded. I'll handle it. Karim's eyes darkened. There's one more thing. Hassan tilted his head. Yes? Karim's fingers gripped the sheets, his voice turning cold, lethal. I want Tariq followed. Hassan exhaled slowly, his gaze sharp. You think he's making his next move? I don't think, Karim said. I know. Hassan's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then, with a slow nod, he murmured, Consider it done. That night, Karim waited. Waited for the moment Amina would come back, for the moment she would sit beside him and whisper more lies into his ear. He let her stroke his hand, let her think she was still in control. But what she didn't know was that as she smiled down at him, whispering empty words of love, his men were already tracking her every move. The walls were closing in, and soon her time would be up. Karim had always believed that patience was a weapon. A careless man seeks revenge in anger. A powerful man waits for the perfect moment to strike. And as he lay in that hospital bed, watching, listening, waiting, he knew that moment was coming soon, because his trap was almost ready to be sprung. 2 days passed. Karim played his role flawlessly. He let Amina believe she was winning, let her believe she had control over his assets, his future, his mind. She came to his bedside, speaking softly, pretending to care. But Karim had learned the truth, and now he was waiting for her to make her final mistake. That mistake came on the 3rd night. Karim had been lying still, pretending to be exhausted, when the door to his hospital room creaked open. It wasn't Amina. It wasn't a nurse. It was Tariq, his own brother. Karim's pulse slowed, but inside his mind was racing. Tariq stepped closer, standing over him, his lips curled into a smirk. You should have died, Karim, he murmured. A sharp, ice-cold rage ran through Karim's veins. But still, he didn't move. Not yet. Tariq exhaled, glancing at the door. I have to admit, this has been fun. His voice was smooth, mocking. Amina put on a good show, don't you think? The grieving wife, waiting for her husband to wake up. He chuckled. She deserves an award. Karim's fingers twitched under the blanket. Tariq had no idea he was standing at the edge of a cliff, one that Karim was about to push him off. The younger Al-Fayed sighed, tilting his head. But now we have a problem. The doctors are talking about a full recovery. If you wake up, things get messy. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a syringe. Karim's blood turned to fire. "You should have died in that accident, brother," Tariq whispered, flicking the needle with his finger. "Now, I'll just have to finish what fate started." And that was when Karim moved, fast. In one swift motion, he grabbed Tariq's wrist, twisting it so hard the syringe fell to the floor. Tariq staggered back, his eyes wide with shock. Karim sat up, fully awake, fully aware, and burning with fury. His voice was lethal. "Surprised, brother?" Tariq froze. You're... Karim swung his legs over the side of the bed, standing slowly, stronger than ever. "I never left, Tariq," he murmured. "I heard everything." Tariq panicked. He moved to run. But the door swung open. Hassan stepped inside. Behind him, security. 2 armed guards. Tariq's face drained of color. Karim took a slow step forward, towering over him. "Did you really think you could betray me?" His voice was calm, dangerous. Tariq's breath came in short, panicked gasps. "Karim, listen." But Karim had already decided his fate. He turned to Hassan. "Take him." The guards grabbed Tariq instantly, twisting his arms behind his back. His brother struggled, cursing, pleading, but Karim didn't care. Not anymore. Because now, there was only one person left to deal with: Amina. And when he was done with her, she would wish he had never even spoken his name. Amina had no idea that her world was about to collapse. She had spent weeks weaving her perfect lie, playing the grieving wife, whispering promises of devotion, preparing to steal everything from the man she once called her husband. But now, her time was up. Karim had allowed her to believe she was in control. He had let her think he was helpless. And now, as he sat in his hospital room, fully awake, fully aware, he was ready to deliver the final blow. Because Tariq was already gone, and Amina was next. The moment the door swung open, Karim didn't move. He sat on the edge of the hospital bed, his expression calm, his body strong. Amina stepped inside, her usual soft, fake smile on her lips. But then, she froze. Her eyes locked on his, her breath catching in her throat. Karim saw it, the moment of realization, the way her fingers tensed at her sides, the way her lips parted slightly, like she had just seen a ghost. She had come expecting a weak, confused man, but she had walked into the room of a hunter. "Habibi," she breathed, forcing herself to smile. "You're awake." Karim tilted his head, studying her, measuring her. Surprised? His voice was dangerously calm. Amina swallowed hard. "The doctors didn't tell me. I asked them not to." A sharp flicker of something crossed her eyes. Fear? Panic? She hid it quickly, stepping closer. "This is wonderful. You're back, my love. I was so worried about you." Lies. He let her get close, let her reach for his hand, her fingers hovering inches above his. Then he spoke. "Where is Tariq?" Amina stilled. Karim watched, fascinated, as she tried to mask the reaction. But he had already seen it. The flash of guilt, the split-second hesitation. She was thinking, calculating, trying to find a way out. But there was none. She licked her lips. "Karim, you just woke up. Let's not talk about... Tariq tried to kill me. The words landed like a bomb in the room. Amina's face lost all color. Kareem stood up. For the first time in weeks, he stood at his full height, his body strong, his presence overpowering. And Amina? She stepped back, like she had just realized she was trapped in a cage with a lion. You thought I wouldn't find out? Kareem's voice was ice. That I wouldn't hear everything? Amina shook her head quickly. No, I don't know what you mean. I know, Amina. His voice was low, sharp, cutting through her excuses like a blade. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Kareem, listen to me. I trusted you. The words were quiet, deadly. And that was when her mask finally cracked. Amina's panic turned to desperation. I had no choice, she blurted. Kareem's eyes darkened. No choice? She stepped forward, her hands trembling. I loved you, Kareem. But you, your power, your empire, you never let me in. I was just another possession to you. Kareem let her talk. Because every word she spoke, it was more proof of her betrayal. She swallowed, her voice shaking now. Tariq said we could finally be free, that you would never give me what I deserved. And after the accident, I thought, you thought I would die. A single tear escaped her eye. I thought we could start over. Kareem exhaled slowly. She was trying to play the victim now, but it was too late. He turned, walked toward the desk, and picked up a small black folder. Then he tossed it at her feet. Amina hesitated, her breath hitching, but slowly she bent down, opened it, and her entire body went still. Inside was everything: bank transactions, secret emails, conversations between her and Tariq, proof. Kareem took a slow step forward. You tried to erase me. His voice was lethal. Now I'll erase you. Amina's hands shook as she stared at the evidence. Her eyes snapped back to his, wild with fear. Kareem, please! You're finished. And in that moment, she knew it was true. The power, the wealth, the luxury she had tried to steal, it was slipping from her grasp. Kareem stepped past her, walking toward the door. Before leaving, he paused, glanced at her one last time, and then he delivered his final words. You should have killed me when you had the chance. And then he walked away, leaving her with nothing.